to some of the latest news coming out of Ukraine is Joel Rubin. Joel is the Vice President for Global Policy and Public Affairs at the National Peace Corps Association. He's also the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and friend of the show, of course, at this point. Joel, thank you for joining us. Can you first just explain, why is the capital of Ukraine under attack again? What does that mean?
Ashley, it's great to be with you. And the attack on Kiev is a desperation signal by Russia in trying to change the narrative right now, because they know they've lost in global opinion from this invasion. But what they're also trying to do is, again, to intimidate the Ukrainians and to say to Ukraine, look, you're getting this higher tech equipment from the United States, from the Western countries, and you're not going anywhere. So that means we're not going anywhere. And we've been hands off of your capital. We're going to try to intimidate you again. It's not going to work, but it's again causing more pain and more suffering. Clearly, this attack was a false attack in terms of identifying, the Russians claimed to identify military targets. There were no military targets, but this is consistent with how Russia has engaged this whole period in terms of lying about its intentions and misrepresenting the truth.
Yeah. Do you think it's realistic to talk about if Russia is able to take over Kyiv? Is that a conversation being had right now?
Goodness, that was the battle that was won by the Ukrainians early on in this war. And it's one that they tout, and it's one that they should be proud of. And if the Russians were to try to make another run at it, they would meet the same fate. It's a city of 3.5 million people. It's heavily fortified. It would be a disaster for Russia to do that, and it would open up a whole other Pandora's box of threats against Russia. Right now, they're in the east. They're digging in. They're having some effective engagements. It's a war of attrition in the east of Ukraine. But to really open up the front again in Kyiv would be a very, very dangerous one for Russia to execute.
Yeah. And you and I had this conversation early on, so I want to have it again in comparison. Last month, the president of Ukraine said diplomacy is the only way to end the war. But sitting where we are now, do you still see that being possible?
I'm glad you brought it up. Ultimately, this is only going to be resolved when there's an agreement, when Vladimir Putin calls off his invasion and says enough is enough. And that's how diplomacy is going to have to work in this case. It's going to be this combination of pressure on Putin, economic pressure through the sanctions, diplomatic pressure through the isolation that we discussed, and the military pressure that is ongoing, that is really showing value to Ukraine, not just to protect itself, but to put Russia on the defensive. So will they come to the table and have an agreement? The White House is looking at President Zelensky of Ukraine to define what an agreement would look like. And it's publicly stating as well that our role in here is to ensure that Ukraine is able to put that kind of pressure on Russia alongside us to get them to come to the table to make that concession. Absent that, and unfortunately we haven't seen much movement towards that, we're going to continue to see this grinding war going forward, and the destruction of significant chunks of Ukraine and the damage to its civilian population, which is what's most distressing about this unending dynamic that Vladimir Putin seems to be willing to continue to engage in, even though he's failing in his efforts.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying it obviously will take the presidents of both of the countries to do this, but it sounds like more so Vladimir Putin could wake up tomorrow and decide it's over, and it would be over. He holds more of the cards here.
Well, he could, because Ukraine never invaded Russia.
Yeah.
Ukraine is in a defensive position. Ukraine wants Russia out. And so if Russia were to say, we're done, we're pulling out, we're no longer invading, that would be the end of the war. There would not be a Ukraine counteroffensive into Russian territory. And so Vladimir Putin, the choices are in front of him, as they have been for months, as they were before he invaded on February 24th. He has to make the decision that it's in his interest to stop this war. And that means the pressure that we're seeing right now and all that we just discussed will have to continue until that affects his calculations. And that also means inside Russia, and we're seeing cracks in the Russian elites, the political elites, the commentators on television as well, talking about how hard this is. Hopefully somebody will get into his brain to recognize reality, and that he'll stop this disastrous war that is only causing harm, not helping him to achieve any of his objectives.
Yeah. Joel, this war has been going on more than 100 days at this point.
Yeah.
What could the U.S. do to help further? It seems like the U.S. has done a lot, but is there more that they can do?
Well, currently, right now, what we're doing is a lot. You're right. Putting in tens of billions of dollars of aid into Ukraine to support it. And we're going to do more. At the end of this month, there will be a NATO meeting in Madrid, and there will be a formal ratification of Finland, Sweden into NATO. And so that's only going to increase the pressure on Russia. More diplomatic isolation. We're seeing Europe moving away from Russian energy supplies, and that means the United States, we're going to have to find more resources to ensure that markets don't continue to get more expensive on energy. So a lot more can be done. It's going to be costly for Russia over time. It only gets harder every day for Russia. And also the American people, I think we need to continue to understand that this is a price we're paying now, but it's a price that's worth it for our freedoms and for the people of Europe to feel safe and secure, that they have the right to their own sovereignty and their own futures defined by them, not by a foreign invading power.
Joel Rubin, as always, thank you for coming here and explaining all this to us. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Ashley.